it's sad, really, how little we think of the children. How, if we thought of the children more often, how much better off they would be if we were able to think of them and restrict our utterances of crazy ideas that are bound to corrupt them and warp their fragile little minds. All right, so this is another non-argument, and this is a particularly emotionally potent one on both sides, because we care about our children, those of us who are parents. We actually do really care about our children. We do think of them often, if not constantly. And it's also very emotionally potent to deal with this, because this is what Socrates was accused of. One of the things he was accused of, along with, saying that the sun and the moon weren't gods. One of the things he was accused of that ultimately led to his death, according to Plato. So he was accused of corrupting the youth of Athens. And the argument for corruption, which is what this fallacy really is, has a couple of different layers of bad thinking and bad logic and emotional manipulation to it. The first one is when you tell someone, think of your children. Of course, people think of their children like we're bred to think of our children. Tom Sowell said once that if it weren't for love, there would be no human race. Love is the most powerful economic force in the world, because if you didn't love this child that consumes all your time and resources, like, you would reproduce. You have to love your babies at the very least. So love is very important. We love our children. And so when we think about the corruption of not just our children, but we empathize other people's children, then we are now having an emotional attachment to whatever the argument is being made. So it's very potent. It's a very potent, sophistic device for that reason. It's also potent and effective as a sophistic device, not just because people are inherently attached to their children and children are a big deal, but because of the most frequent rebuttal to this argument, which is, and it's a valid rebuttal. And what you'll say is when someone says, hey, I don't think violent video games should be in that store because I don't want my kid exposed to violent video games. That's like an argument for censorship. And the response is, well, you as the possessor of the money, as the parent who's controlling what the kid is doing and has access to, it's your responsibility what media they consume. And that is totally valid. Except when you give that rebuttal, you have actually skipped over the most important element, which is to argue whether violent video games are corrupting at all, right? Are they bad for children? Are they bad in general? Because things that are bad for children are probably also bad for adults, because we're both people. And some things are like not as bad for kids as they are for adults, obviously. But, generally we tend to kind of sweep. It's like adults are immune to everything and children are, susceptible to everything. So we've skipped over the whole argument of whether something is bad. And this can also be used really potently, like when people talk about teaching, like, say, evolution in schools. There's this creationist side that's very against the exposure of children to this idea, and missing in the debate, it's like, well, I have a right to, protect my kids. Missing in the debate is whether evolution, discussing it, is a corrupting influence in itself. And we need to have that discussion before we start saying, think of my children. My children are going to abandon their faith because you're teaching them, that replicating organisms based on DNA change over time. Very wicked. It could be used to really good effect there. There's also a little bit of a built-in assumption that is fallacious when you are arguing. You say, think about the children, which is when you're saying you're going to corrupt the youth, you're saying the youth are different from people that aren't youth, right? So children are different from adults. And you're making the argument that what is bad for children is somehow not bad for adults. So children are susceptible to this corrupting influence, but adults are not susceptible to this corrupting influence. And at some point, the child stops being a child and goes over into that adult category. They stop being a child, they go to be an adult category where they can consume the media. Now, even without defining that line, if the person goes from being an irrational being to a rational being, are they then capable of rejecting any possible corrupting, irrational, bad idea? And if the answer is no, then what you're really saying is that adults are not rational either, right? That we only want adults to see it for some other reason, right? Like they already have their ideas set in their head. Like we're basically making an argument that adults, neither children or adults, are rational. And I think like the test of this of this, and it's not, I'm not gonna say it's in 100% of all four of the children arguments, but it's inherent in a lot of them. Like think of Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny, right? None of you who are watching this, I hope, believe in Santa Claus, that there's a jolly red man who flies around the world and delivers presents to people supernaturally. But as a child, you might have believed Santa Claus existed. Why did you believe Santa Claus existed? Because somebody told you he existed. The idea of Santa Claus did not just like spring into your head like a flower bud opening up. It's like, oh my God, I've just conceived of this being Santa Claus. Like, no, your parents like, there's this guy Santa Claus, and if you're a very good boy, he's going to bring you some presents, and that'll be good. So you need to be a good boy all year. And you're like, I'm going to be a good boy, and I'm going to get some presents. And you get presents, and then later you grow up and you realize, okay, there's the price tags on this toy because I think my dad got it at Walmart, right? And then you stop believing because the evidence suggests that there is no Santa Claus, and you start to think rationally. So eventually you go from being this irrational being that's like, yes, I believe in Santa Claus because Daddy told me, to being a rational adult where you're like, I don't believe in Santa Claus because he makes no sense. Okay, so there's the pudding test for that. And if you're a rational adult, hopefully you can reject bad ideas that you remember from your childhood, and most of us have. All right, I'm gonna guess every person who's watching has had, if it's not Santa Claus, it's something else. You were told never cross the street. Like, well, now you do cross the street because you're more aware of what that means. So anyway, you grow to be a rational being, which really means that the corrupting influence of youth is gonna be minimal, right? Or it's gonna be temporary at best. And that's one of the things we have to really consider when we're making an argument, for corruption. When somebody's making an argument for corruption, I don't want to use the term we because you guys aren't doing it, hopefully. But if you're making an argument for corruption, then you have to be aware, hey, turns out like, yeah, if someone becomes a rational being, they're able to, consider ideas even in the past. So anyway, that is that one. I think that's a really potent one, and it's one that's used a lot. And I bring it up because of that. I'll probably link that video below. I made a video about some hubbub over the butt of one Overwatch character being seen in one pose because, females have buttocks, and that's a big problem for the children. The guy evokes like, what, my daughter's going to grow up thinking this person's a sex symbol. It's like, but you don't care about the other people as sex symbols. Anyway, it's like, well, if she grows up with this person as a sex symbol and then she becomes a rational adult and goes like, oh, well, Tracer has some sex elements. As a rational adult, I can understand that, right? So the argument for corruption in that case is really self-defeating. It is illogical. It is a fallacy in that case. So thanks so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And thanks for all the comments on this series and all the encouragement. I really have a lot of fun talking about these things. And please let me know what you want to see and what pieces of content you actually enjoy. I do actually want to provide some value to people, and I do actually want to explore things that other people are interested in exploring as well. So let me know what you think. You can visit my websites, by the way. I have some new stuff up on DVS Press and davidvstewart.com, and let me know, and have a great day.